Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Understable Discourse. Hopefully, your soon-to-be #1 place for disc golf analysis and discussion. So let's get into it. This week we have a kind of a shorter episode for you as there wasn't too much that happened. We're going to go over the Music City Open, talk about some of the first reviews of sports betting that happened this past weekend. We'll take a look ahead at the Go Throw number 3 at the Masters Invitational at Eagles Crossing, and just a few other hot topics going around. So let's get into it. Now, the Music City Open, or as I would like to call it, the event that Mother Nature didn't want to allow happen, was hit with a combination of rain. They had tornado warnings and just high winds, and it was not a very hospitable place to be for quite a while there. And at one point, the course just looked unplayable. It absolutely looked unplayable. There were tee areas that were underwater. Basically, things were lakes, and the event staff pulled off a miracle. Like I said, on Thursday, holes 1 and hole 16 were basically lakes and underwater, and the course was just a mess. And while a lot of places wouldn't have had the infrastructure to come in and take care of it, not these guys. They put forth a borderline Herculean effort to make this course playable, including things like bringing in a bunch of mulch to lay it down to make play areas a bit easier to deal with. They also were able to unblock a major drainage area and get a lot of the water drained off. And I even overheard that some players were actively helping in the process as well. So a lot of effort and sweat equity, that's sweat equity for those who don't know, went into making sure this event was able to go off without a hitch. Now, unfortunately, not everything was perfect because we lost our match play event this week. As that was supposed to happen on Thursday, and Thursday was when the course looked the absolute worst, it was pretty obvious that match play wasn't going to happen because they weren't going to give out flippers and snorkels to all the players, although that would have been maybe a little bit entertaining to watch. What they're going to end up doing is moving the match play to a future event. We're not quite sure yet which one they're going to be going to. There's a few that I'd like to see them go to, but we'll see. It remains to be seen what the final outcome for that is going to be. Now, for the actual event itself, for Music City Open, round 1 had not too many issues aside from the course obviously being wet and muddy and a bit soggy, and ground conditions were tough, but they weren't necessarily terrible. Probably a few players having to throw some extra standstills, more than they would normally do in an event. And like I said earlier, without the event staff and the course maintenance staff, this event never would have happened. In round 2, FPO was able to go out and complete their normal round, and the MPO almost were able to do it, getting just near halfway through the round for the lead card, and their round was cut short due to the weather. So what they ended up doing was they moved the rest of that round to the following morning, and then the FPO played their final round, and then the MPO came back out and played their final round. So some people had to play a little bit double duty on Sunday morning and Sunday afternoon. Let's talk about the FPO results. Round 1 started off with an absolute banger because we got a glimpse of what the match play would have looked like because we had Silva and Kristen on the same card together. And Kristen had a really, really solid round cooking, but she finished with 2 bogeys at the end that kind of stopped her momentum a little bit in its tracks. Silva, on the other hand, was not stopped by any bogeys at the end of the round as she finished with birdies on 15, 16, 17, and 18 on her way to a 7-under round event, and that tied her for the lead going into round 2. She tied with Missy Gannon, who birdied 6 of the last 8 holes to have quite the incredible finish and to give us the first glimpse at the Missy Gannon that I think a lot of us expected to see at some point this year, but maybe haven't quite seen yet. Now, like I said, the course conditions weren't the greatest, and the course itself was playing difficult. There were only 8 total competitors out of the 49 who finished under par in the FPO division for round 1. And there was one very consistent theme, and that was the back 9 was definitely the place you had to score your birdies. The front 9 averaged 2.84 strokes over par for the FPO division in round 1, and the back 9 averaged 0.88 strokes over par. So that's a 2-stroke swing that we were seeing from the front 9 to the back 9. And on the front 9, really, you could thank 2 holes specifically that were the big menaces for the FPO division, averaging 1.78 strokes over par together. That's holes 4 and hole 8. Hole 4 led the entire field with a 27% double bogey or worse rate, and hole 8 led the field with a 61% bogey or worse rate. But the big issue on these holes were mostly that nobody could find themselves on the dance floor to even have a chance for par or birdie, because in that first round, there were only a combined 2 out of 98 possible C1 hits in regulation. That means out of 98 attempts at the hole, only 2 competitors were able to be within C1 in regulation. And out of the entire field, only 9 people were within C2 in regulation. So this hole wasn't surrendering any. These 2 holes weren't surrendering any opportunities for pars or birdies. If you wanted one, you were going to have to hit some circle 2 putt or maybe throw it in from outside circle 2, and that certainly wasn't happening looking at the statistics. Round 2 made for a lot more of the same with the course. Holes 4 and 8 were once again menaces to the field, averaging a combined 1.57 strokes over par. However, the scores for the course itself were a bit more balanced, seeing the front 9 averaging 1.68 strokes over par and the back 9 averaging 1.29 strokes over par. So from round 1 to round 2, I don't know if it's just a comfortability with the course or with the course conditions on the back 9 worsening a little bit, but we saw the 2 rounds kind of come together, or the 2 parts of the course come together to make a bit more of a consistent difficulty for the FPO field. And taking advantage of the course was Kristen. She smoked the field with an 11 under par, finishing 7 for 7 to finish the round. And speaking of 7, that's what Silva scored for the second round. So Silva carded 2 7-unders in a row, and Kristen backed up her 3 under with an 11 under, leading the 2 of them to have a 2-way tie at the top, with a 4-stroke lead over Missy Gannon, who was in third, and a 5-stroke lead over Ella Hansen, who was tied for 4th with Evelina Salonen. Now, due to the conditions of the course and the amount of time they had to spend to have the MPO play first, they made the decision to cut the field at the cash line going into round 3, so that cut the FPO field down to the top 25 who played the course for the third round. And only a few holes into that round, Silva found herself in the lead. And despite Kristen tying it back up on hole 8, Silva would go on to birdie the next 2 holes, and Kristen, she did not birdie those holes. And then she had a very, very tough double bogey on hole 11 after a difficult drive. And this put Silva in the driver's seat. She was up by 4 strokes with 7 holes left to play. Probably the best position Silva's ever been in to take down Kristen and win her first event on American soil. The only problem is, this is Kristen we're talking about. And she dug deep, and she found that inner goat mentality, and she decided to spend the next 3 holes getting birdies. She took a little break for a par, and then she finished with another turkey. And unfortunately, the story of the entire round for Silva is going to be hole 17. Now, I'm sad to say, but she's going to probably see hole 17 in her sleep for a couple of days, if she hasn't already since the event. Not having a well-established forehand is probably one of the things that made hole 17 difficult for Silva. It was a bit of a tougher play because the way hole 17 was set up is that it was a pretty straight shot out to a landing area, and then you would have to throw a second shot up the hill to a pretty open green, with some OB, very, very generous space to land in. But the key was getting your disc into the right place off the tee, and for anyone who had a forehand, you were able to not only get through the gap, but also make a little bit of progress up the hill to cut off some distance for that shot. Silva, not being a very seasoned forehand player, was opting to choose to throw the backhand, which is no problem because a straight backhand landing into the landing area would give you a perfectly wide open shot up to the basket to get your birdie. The only difference is you may not get the 30 or 40 extra feet that someone throwing a really competent forehand would have. And that is proven because in round 1, Silva birdied the hole, and in round 2, she parred it. So it's something that she had practiced, she was prepared for, but unfortunately in round 3, things did not go the way she intended them to go. So off the tee of 17, she had a bit of a slight early release, and it pushed her drive into the rough, to a pretty difficult position. She kind of had to take a shot from a knee. She was going to try to throw a little bailout shot with a forehand, and she kind of threw the disc into the only single place you couldn't throw it, and that was this small, and when I say small, I mean, for the room she had, very small collection of trees, no more than probably 75 feet in front of her. she threw her forehand right into there, and it was low. It went right into the ground. It definitely didn't look like someone who is comfortable with the forehand, but given her the position she was at, there probably wasn't much of a backhand to be thrown there. But unfortunately, the position she put herself in, unless she threw some kind of a miracle shot, there was no way that she was going to be able to salvage a par, because the backhand that she had available to her was cut off by the fact that there were trees right in the middle of it. So she was going to have to kind of almost do like a 2/3 throw to protect her arm from hitting the trees. And the idea of doing some kind of lean out to the right forehand definitely wasn't going to happen, especially after how poorly the forehand that led her to that position went. And what didn't make anything easier for her is the fact that Kristen, just before, so Silva throws the shot into the trees, and then Kristen steps up to her lie, which is only a couple feet back, but just outside the trees, and throws this beautiful dime of a forehand to put herself up by the basket. So we know she's taking the birdie there. So they're putting a lot of pressure on Silva to, get it right on the hole. So that's how hole 17 played out. It didn't really work out too well for Silva, and essentially what ended up happening is they went into hole 18, and Kristen, put it to a few feet. Silva was just outside of C1. She could not make the putt. Kristen birdied it. Here we go. We're going into a playoff. And guess where we're going? Right back to hole 17. And that's why I said that Silva's probably going to see this hole in her dreams, because once again, she throws her drive just a bit too long, this time not getting into the trees per se, but cutting off her angle, making for a much more difficult approach to the basket. That's not just about power, but about some technicality as well. And once again, Kristen steps up and throws her second shot to pretty much under the basket. So Silva's got to put her shot close, or nothing's going to happen here. But the problem is Silva steps up to her putt, and she just doesn't hit it. And you can see immediately the emotion that Silva went through, the frustration to know that she was right there. A 4-stroke lead, all she had to do was defend it, and she wasn't able to do that. And for someone who's been chasing down the first win on American soil for so long, you could definitely see all the emotion come to play right then and there in that moment. But obviously that means that this win was a three-peat for Kristen, as she won the last 2 years, and this would be her second three-peat of the season, having done so at Waco not that many weeks ago. Now, hopping over to the MPO field, if you thought the drama was over after the FPO field, if you were a spectator on the grounds and you're like, there's no way it's getting better than that, I'm leaving, I'm headed out, very, very wrong. So in round 1, we saw both Ricky Wysocki and Isaac Robinson come out swinging with 8 under par rounds. And I think that's a bit significant because both of these players, we haven't seen the same level of consistency out of them this season that we're very, very used to seeing. And maybe that's because they both have new bags, because of new manufacturers, and they're just starting to get used to what they're throwing in like a tournament setting. But even stranger than that, their fellow lead card mates at the end of the round were going to end up being Austin Turner and Gavin Phillips, who are honestly not names that I think most people who only pay attention to probably who wins events, they're probably not used to hearing names like Austin Turner and Gavin Phillips. Both those men are known for aces. Gavin, if you don't remember, last week got 2 aces at the Open at Austin within the same event, which was unreal to behold. And Austin Turner, I don't know how many of you follow him and his social media, especially on Instagram. That man throws aces everywhere. If there's a hole that can be aced, he's acing it. And he's known for incredible power, a great thrower, and getting aces. So seeing him on lead card was going to be a lot of fun, because I think everyone was really excited to watch him throw for the second round. Now, round 2, like we said, occurred over the course of multiple days, with the first half being on Saturday and the second half being on Sunday morning. And that 8 under score that we saw that led the field in the first round, that just wasn't going to cut it on day 2. And there were several really surging competitors who were able to put down some pretty incredible scores. First of which is Paul Macbeth, who decided to drop a bogey-free 9 under par to jump into a tie for first place with none other than Austin Turner, who also shot another 8 under, or an 8 under round, partnering with his 7 under round in the first round. So Austin having another incredible round and finding himself on lead card yet again with Paul McBeth. Additionally, you had Ezra Robinson, who decided to shoot 10 under par and jump 18 spots to get himself onto the lead card for round 3. However, Nicholas Antala did one better than that at 11 under, surging 26 total spots to find himself on the lead card for round 3. Not to be outdone, Casey White decided to tie the course record of 12 under, climbing 36 spots, not to land on the lead card, because as you know, we only have 4 people there, but he found himself at the top of the chase card, posed to, maybe get another one of those types of rounds and put himself in contention for the event. When you look at these collective 5 competitors in this round, they went a total of 27 under on the back 9 and only had 3 bogeys amongst their entire 5 rounds. These 5, they were the 5 horsemen, and they blitzed the course and put themselves all in contention for that final round to potentially be someone to have to pay attention to. Now, speaking of people that we have to pay attention to, let's talk about round 3, where, like I mentioned earlier, they ended up having to cut it down to the cash line, meaning only the top 44 plus ties made it into this final round. And the one man who no one was watching, but everyone should keep an eye on at all times, was Gannon Buhr, who was starting 5 strokes back from the lead. And he made sure that everyone was going to be paying attention to him, because he decided to get 8 birdies in the first 9 holes in the front half of the course for himself. But even despite that, the battle between Paul, Austin, and Nicholas was brewing. At the halfway mark of the final round, Paul and Nicholas were then tied at 21 under, and Austin and Gannon, who was 2 holes ahead at the time, they were tied at 20 under. So we now have this 4-way deadlock of who's going to stay consistent enough, and we know that a lot of the birdies are going to happen on the back 9 typically. So at this point, the feeling is it's anyone's game. And to prove that point, just 3 holes later, we now have an official 4-way tie between all competitors. Obviously, Gannon is 2 holes ahead, but that doesn't mean he's out of contention here, especially with all 4 of them being tied. And hole 15 is kind of where all that changed, because off the tee, we got a couple good throws, and Paul McBeth steps up to throw what should be a pretty typical forehand. And what he ends up doing is kind of turning it over and throwing a bit of an errant forehand that goes out of bounds pretty early and never really gets back in bounds. And it kind of leaves him with about 100-foot putt to save his par, and he puts a really good bid on it. It's an elevated basket. It's a dangerous green to blow past the basket, and he puts it so close, and it just comes up a little bit short. And they cut over to the right, where you had got Nicholas, who's sitting at about the 65 foot mark, and he probably sees himself, hey, I'm gaining a stroke on Paul here because I didn't go out of bounds, so I can get the par. But that's not enough for Nicholas, because he decides to step up and just nail this C2 putt, and you see him pump his fists. And he kind of, saunters to the basket. He has a 2-stroke lead now on both Paul and Austin. And you just feel the energy completely shift over into Nicholas's favor. And you start reminiscing over what happened at the Open at Austin when Nicholas was surging down the stretch to push that event as well. Paul did have an opportunity on hole 17 to gain 1 stroke back on Nicholas when he found himself at the circle's edge for a birdie opportunity, probably around that 35-foot mark. And unfortunately, he just left the putt way too high, which is something that's been a bit odd to see, because in years gone by, that would have been bread and butter for Paul McBeth. That opportunity to take a stroke on someone when they didn't put themselves in position to birdie, the old Paul would have been salivating over that, would have knocked that putt down and gone into the final hole only down by 1, ready to apply pressure on the young kid. But that's just not what we're seeing nowadays. We're seeing a Paul McBeth who's definitely putting himself in contention at every single event. And he's been on more final round lead cards than a lot of people. But we haven't seen him kind of seal the deal quite yet. Meanwhile, you jump over to Gannon, who just took a bogey on hole 18. So with Paul not getting that birdie, Austin still being 2 strokes back, and Gannon taking the bogey on hole 18, all Nicholas has to do is get a par, and this whole event is his. He's got to land his drive in bounds and get the par. And so, as if he's done it 100 different times, he throws a beautiful shot that lands him just outside C1 and lands him a really, really sweet guitar. And now, both Niklas and Gannon shot 13 under course record scores to go out strong here, but what a testament to Niklas's consistency. The last couple events, every single time someone has let the door slide open a little bit, Niklas has had no problem saying, I'll go through it. And he has put himself in position twice, and he has now won twice. And he is officially, I think one of my favorite comments that I saw was that he now has the hat, he has the guitar. All we have to do is get this man to win some kind of a pickup truck, and he will be a full-fledged Texan at this point. A couple of notes that I want to make about the Music City Open in general is, number one, I think it turned out to be a lot more entertaining than people gave it credit for. Typically, it is a bit more of an open style course with a couple, wooded features here and gaps here and there. And I think sometimes this is a stretch of the tour where people can get a little fatigue after watching the first 3 or 4 events. And it's probably an easy event to tune out because it doesn't film the most exciting, but it turned out to be a really, really incredibly exciting event that I hope everyone got a chance to watch. And if you haven't, go back and check it out because really, even with me telling you how it went down, it was still pretty incredible to watch. A couple other notes, things like, Silva, I think, really showed us for the first time that there is true competition for Kristen down the stretch. Obviously, Holland Handley has pushed Kristen before, and there are other players who are capable of doing it, but it's nice to see somebody else stepping up who's able to push Kristen, and I think Silva's primed to get her first win in the States this year. It's just a matter of what event is it going to be at, and how hard is she going to have to work to take down Kristen in order to do it. One of the biggest stories out of the MCO this weekend was Simon Lizotte actually not really putting forth an effort to get the three-peat. We saw Kristen get the three-peat, and everyone was really, really excited to see Simon do it, as he typically tends to excel at this course. But kind of like I said in the last episode, as much as I would have loved him to get the three-peat, I just didn't think he was going to be able to do it, and it turns out he wasn't. He finished the event tied for 28th, and I think this was a tough one for him. It didn't seem like, if you look at his rounds, like he was ever really able to get any momentum going. His first round ended at even, and not to say that made him out of it, because Niklas was only 2 under after his first round, and he fought back to win the event, so being even doesn't technically mean Simon was out of it, but to follow up as even with a 6 under and then finish with a 4 under, it just felt like Simon was never able to get the gas that he needed to kind of push over and have those event defining rounds that he needed. I think the player of the event that I'm the most impressed with, and the one I'm going to be keeping my eye on the most, is probably going to be Austin Turner, because this is his best ever finish on tour at being tied for second, and we don't get to see a lot of lefty domination on tour. I mean, there are some really good lefties out there. I think of people like Nathan Queen and Chris Clemens, and even though he doesn't really put himself in contention a lot, I think Zach Melton is one of the funniest guys on the planet. He's one of the most fun pros to be around, but we don't see a lot of lefties who are out there really putting pressure on, the lead card and the chase card. So it was great to see Austin be able to do that. And, we used to see Chris Clemens do that. We haven't really seen him very much anymore. Earlier this year, Nathan Queen put some pressure on at Waco, but he kind of fell off as the event went on. So it was really exciting to see Austin Turner take this all the way down to the wire and be in a position where maybe if he would have aced hole 18, we could have had ourselves a little playoff action going on. But otherwise, just an incredible finish on his end. And it was really, really fun to watch. We know him for his power. We know him for his throwing. I think if he can just get his putt put together a bit more, that'll put him in a position to really be more competitive every week. He finished at 81% C1X for the entire event, compared to Niklas's 91%. You can tell where that little bit of gap is, because there were some putts where he was like right inside circle's edge. It should have been a putt that he made, and he just left it a bit low. So you give him those 2 or 3 strokes that he left on the putting green, and he's right there with Niklas at the end. So I hope that he kind of gets those things figured out and keeps up this same level of effort, because I want to keep seeing him on lead cards going forward. Another major thing that happened this weekend was it was the first weekend that we had access to betting for disc golf. I mean, we've had betting before in the formation of Prize Picks, but this is the first time since then that we've been able to see this put in play. And we had a lot of interesting storylines when it came to that, and I think we'll see more as time goes out. But the lines that I'm the most interested in were the lines set forth by Underdog. Now, Underdog did something that was very, very straightforward. It was basically you had to pick better or worse for a finishing position for a number of players. And I'm going to throw some pictures up on the screen of what the betting lines were, and we'll kind of go through them here real quick. But in this first one, you can kind of see that the line for Kristen was 2.5. So for those who don't know what I'm talking about, basically what they're saying is you had to determine whether or not Kristen was going to finish better than 2.5th place or worse than 2.5th place. And they put it in the middle so that way, you know, if they say better or worse than second place, then you're kind of in a weird spot where you can't use second place. So they say 2.5. So basically, if you think Kristen's going to finish in first or second, you hit the better. If you think she's going to finish in worse than second place, so third or worse, you go under. And that kind of goes down the line here. So you got Kristen at 2.5. We know she finished in first place. Chris Dickerson at 11.5. He ended up finishing in 20th. Simon Lizotte at 8.5, which I think was a very, very interesting line based upon the history of him at this event. You could definitely tell they took some recency when it came to this number, because if you just use past performance at the event, Simon definitely would have had a much more aggressive line, probably something along the lines of like a 3.5 or whatnot, but because of his recent performance this season, I think that's why they gave him the 8.5. He finished in 28th, and then you have Anthony Barella, who was an 8.5, and he finished at 20th. On the second line here, you can see Ezra Robinson finishing at 10.5. It was pretty close. He finished in 8th. Paul McBeth at 9.5, he finished 4th. Holland Hanley at 3.5, and she finished 3rd. So that was a really, really great line there. Ricky Wysocki at 4.5. This is probably one of their biggest misses because he came in 24th place. That's a hard one to judge if you're trying to create. And I'd love to know how they go about, like, what the algorithm or model is that makes these betting lines, because I think we all know, anyone here who's watched disc golf, that Ricky Wysocki definitely is worthy of a 4.5, although this season's been a little bit slower of a start for him. I imagine players like that who just recently switched manufacturers, that's a really hard thing to be able to predict when it comes to betting lines. Looking at the third one here, you can see Gannon Burr at 3.5. He finished in 2nd. That's pretty close. Evelina Solon at 5.5. She finished in 4th. Once again, very close. Missy Gannon, 4.5. She finished 5th. Super close. Isaac Robinson at 9.5. He finished 5th. Nicholas Antala at 9.5. He finished 1st. That's another interesting one because that, unlike Simon, where he has great history at this event, but he has not so great recency, Nicholas is the opposite kind of person who has not very good history at this event, but he has really great recency in terms of his event win that he just had at the Open at Austin. So his number there is also pretty curious. On the next one, you can see Calvin Heimberg at 6.5. He finished 13th. Hannah Blomroos at 8.5. She finished 26th. That's another probably one of the bigger misses for them. Kat Murch at 9.5. She finished 8th. Ella Hansen, 7.5. She finished 7th. Very close. Natalie Ryan at 9.5. And then Owen Scoggins on this last one. Owen Scoggins at 3.5. She finished 12th. And Haley King at 10.5, who finished 10th. So I know I just spurted a whole lot of numbers at you. I think one of the things that's really important is we kind of look and see how they did for the different divisions, because we can learn a lot from looking at these numbers. Like, so for instance, for all of the FPO players that I just mentioned, there's 10 of them. On average, they were 4.2 spots away from the actual finishing position. So if they said that Kristen was going to finish 2.5, she finished 1st, then they were 1.5 spots away. So on average, they were 4.2 spots away from the correct position that they finished. That means that with 4 of the 10 predictions being within 1 spot, so being a 0.5. And if you take away the one outlier in there, the outlier was, let me just check quick, my apologies. If you take away Henna with her difference of 17.5, that average drops down to 2.72 spots away, which means that the FPO lines they set were pretty competitive. They were pretty good, and there were 4 that were within a single position. Now, I know this sport is hard to predict sometimes, but that's pretty good. Looking over at the MPO side, the average was 8.8 spots away, with 0 out of 10 being within 1 spot. And so we have to ask ourselves, what does this tell us about the lines, about disc golf in general. I think the biggest thing is that there is a definite lack of parity in the FPO field, and that makes the line creation a bit easier to do for their division. Whereas on the MPO side, it is so volatile right now because of how many players that can sort of pop into and out of success in these tournaments is just, it makes an inherently higher risk to bet on the MPO side. So I'll be very curious to see what they do as the season goes on for MPO. Curious to see if more people just stick to the FPO, because obviously the caveat is, while they're more accurate in picking lines for the FPO, that means your margin for error is also a lot smaller. So they're a lot closer to the right, finishing positions, but because there isn't a lot of movement in the FPO field, it's easy for a player to fall 1 or 2 spots and then be out of the line that you were betting against. Whereas with MPO, you can have wild swings in one direction or another. Now, so one of the things that we're going to be doing going forward, as we can get access to some of these betting lines, look at that. I thought a lot about how I wanted to do this because I think some people aren't big fans of betting. Some people are really big fans of betting and they want to know what the numbers are. I think statistically it's very, very relevant to look and see where these lines are at, because if we care about stats and we care about the relationship that stats have with these things, it's something that we should talk about. So for all of you out there who have ever been in any kind of a high school or college finance class, you've probably played the game where you had fake money that you put into a stock market challenge to see how well you would do. Obviously, I live in the state of Pennsylvania, so I don't find myself in a position to be able to even put money on any of these betting lines, so I can't show you what real results would look like. But what I plan on doing is every week we're going to invest some imaginary, understable discourse bucks, and we're going to see what we would have done, how we would have done had we put in money in those particular lines, and we'll see how we do. We'll look at things like the different sports books. We'll look at the daily fantasy sports, talk about what lineups we would choose. And obviously, this goes without saying, and you're going to hear me say this every time we get to this topic going forward, is that gambling is a really risky thing, and it's something that not everyone should do. And it's nothing where it doesn't matter how good your stats are, it doesn't matter how reliable you think the data you have in front of you is. Gambling is a risk. It's not perfect, and there's never a guarantee of winning. You should never be gambling with money that you really, really need, and it should only ever be something that comes out of disposable income. So please, if you find yourself in a position where you are able to gamble on disc golf, please do me a favor, or gambling in general, do so responsibly. Don't put yourself in a tough or rough spot. Make sure you're doing it responsibly. That's a big thing. We're going to be talking about that every time we get into this, because I cannot express that enough. Gambling can ruin lives, and I don't want to see that happen. I want to see people be able to enjoy it at the disc golf level. I want to see I want to see people be able to put in $50 and come out with $100 because they had a good gut instinct and the stats kind of backed it up a little bit, and that's great. I don't want to see people ruining their lives because they're betting with money that they don't really have or shouldn't be using. Now let's hop over to the Go Throw Tour, which sees its third event this upcoming weekend, and it's going to be the big event, the one that they've been hyping up since the very, very beginning of the Go Throw Tour, and that's the one that's going to be at Eagles Crossing. So there are a lot of details to go over here. They're adding $50,000 of added cash for the winner pot, and the winner themselves are going to take home $20,000. That is a pretty significant amount of money. That puts this particular Go Throw stop in line with a number of the disc golf majors, and is one of the bigger payouts that anyone is going to be able to see this year. So it's a pretty big deal to be a part of this event. And it's not just the event itself. They're clearly trying to create almost a full week of experience for fans while they're there, because on Wednesday they're hosting a Birdie or Die challenge, and they're hosting their classic Beat the Pros challenge. On Thursday, they're having a disc golf triathlon, which features a King of the Hill power and distance challenge, a shot placement accuracy challenge, and a putting precision challenge that's going to be open to, I believe they said that the disc golf triathlon is open to any current DGPT tour card holder. So imagine seeing, 10 or 12 of your favorite pros going at it in terms of distance, placement, putting. That's going to be kind of fun to watch. And then on Friday, they're going to have the Ace Run Challenge. They're going to have the OTB Tour Skins that we all know about and love. And they're going to have a Mighty Glow Round, a 9-hole glow round at night at Eagles Crossing. That's got to be pretty cool. And then Saturday and Sunday, they have the actual event themselves. One really interesting thing when you look at this event is that it is labeled as an invitational. And if you look, it really is an invitational, because for every go-through event before this, and for the ones after this so far that I can see, there are full sign-up pages where you can sign up for amateur divisions. There's an FPO field and all of that. For this event, that's just not the case. The only way to know who's playing in this event is if you go to the website and you look at the event, it'll show you that there is currently an invited field of 32 top MPO players who are going to be at this event. It's the strongest field they have ever been able to put together for their first 3 events. And obviously, $20,000 to the winner, that's a pretty big pull. And that's some good money going to the rest of the winners. So I can see why so many are showing up for this flagship event. And I wonder how many people are going to linger on for other events that happen on the Go Throw Tour after this. And what makes that really interesting is there's no FPO field here. And not having an FPO field is definitely interesting. I think it shows us, Go Throw's always had this very all-inclusive, very relaxed vibe. But at the end of the day, they do need money and they need to be able to succeed financially. And ultimately, we all know this. I'm a huge advocate for the FPO division. I think we should be watching more of their coverage. I think we should be supporting their players more. However, when it comes to the general audience, MPO viewership is significantly greater than FPO viewership. And if you were launching something brand new and you wanted to make sure it was successful, I can see that they're putting a lot of their eggs into the MPO basket. And maybe the idea is they're trying to build their foundation with MPO. And then as they dive deeper and get into it, the FPO are going to come along behind that as they're able to have more time, energy, money, and resources to put into the FPO content. The Eagles Crossing track is really impressive. It probably is one of the most impressive disc golf courses in the country. Many millions of dollars went into creating it. It requires a combination of distance, accuracy, consistency. If you've never seen the course before, they had a big money skins match there before. There have been a couple other skins matches at this property. In fact, Calvin won $50,000 at the OG big money skins match. And this is going to be the first time, though, that we're going to see this many great players on the course in a tournament style, because it's only been skins matches and very selective up to this point. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch this one. Personally, I can't wait because, like I said, it's the first time we're going to see this many top pros taking on Eagles Crossing. And I know that the course designer there, the course owner, he's looking to really put them to the test. We're not going to dive into all the intricacies of the holes there. We don't really have a lot of history of hole stats to go on, and maybe as the Go Through Tour goes on, I'll come back if they do the courses in future years and take a look at see what I can garner from what we've seen so far. But I'm going to use my a little eye test here, a little gut reaction for some, my predictions for the podium. So these aren't necessarily backed by statistics. It's just more my opinion and my feel. In third place, I'm going to pick Aaron Gossage, which I think is a bit of a stretch considering his current performance on tour. But if you look at the rest of the field, I think he has the distance and the skills necessary for this course. And if his putt is just half decent this weekend, I think he could be a real menace here. I could see Aaron Gossage being really sneaky, and taking third place. Coming in second place, I've got Calvin Heimberg. He's had a lot of success at this course before. I think he's going to continue that trend. And it's just a good course for him all around because of the way his game plays. And I know, first place, surprise, surprise, Gannon Buhr. Is it a safe pick? Yes. Is it a boring pick? Yes. But did you see his final round at MCO? He shot 13 down. All right, as long as his leg is healthy, I think he's going to be okay. I think he's going to pop off a little bit, and we're going to see, Gannon Buhr take down his first big paycheck of the year. Maybe this will jumpstart his season on the Pro Tour. I don't know. It's been a very interesting year so far. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about today, and I'm going to keep this pretty brief, and that's the Abigail Wilson situation. Now, you might have been wondering if I was going to breeze past this topic, and the answer is yes, I'm going to breeze past this topic, and that's because there have been plenty of voices that have been discussing this on plenty of forums and plenty of videos, podcasts, and all of that, and I don't think at this point I have anything new and that I can say to add to this. And I don't think that anything I say is going to add any particular value to either side, based upon what's been said so far by all parties included. The only things I really care about, number one, is that protests are done peacefully. There's no reason to resort to any kind of physical violence. And obviously that I really care that the discussion around this maintains as civil as possible. I know there can be a lot of emotion and heat on both sides of the aisle here, but I think it's really important that if we're going to come together and discuss this, it has to be a discussion. It doesn't have to be an argument. If you'd like to hear Abigail's side of the story, go check out Tour Life last night. I was on there for a couple of segments, and not long after my segment was over, she hopped into the chat, and they were able to get her on the show, and she shared a bit about her side, her perspective, her opinion, a lot of opinion stuff. And what I like about it is that after the show was over, we talked very quickly, and they're going to try to get Jeff Spring on the show next week to discuss his side of the particular topic and share from his perspective what's going on. I think it's really, really important to listen to the different voices in the conversation, to be able to have the discussions, and just, that's a very, very important thing. So I'm not going to add anything else to that. You should go check it out if you want to go see some good discussion on the matter. But that's all I'm going to say about that at this time. But listen, everybody out there, thank you so much for watching this week's episode. I really appreciate it week to week. A lot of effort gets put into these, even for these like shorter ones where there's a little bit less detail. I appreciate every second that you spend here listening to me talk. I know that I can drone on sometimes about things, but please make sure to subscribe to our channel. It's the #1 way to support Understable Discourse is to subscribe down below. You'll be able to see our weekly content. Pretty soon we're going to be coming out with a bit more than just this weekly show. You're going to be seeing some shorts going up of clips from the show and maybe some other content down the road. I'm looking to eventually here partway through the year see if I can start getting some guests on here, which would be really, really interesting to see and talk about, where disc golf statistics make their way into all kinds of components within our sport. While you're here, also hit that like button. Let me know in the comments, you know what? Let me know in the comments where you're hoping they move the first round of match play to. What event are you hoping they move that to? What course do you want to see? Are you a sadist and you want to watch them play match play at Northwood Black? Or maybe a different course? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. But until next time, everybody, have a great rest of your week. Make sure you're looking at all the stats, and I'll talk to you next time.